Hey guys, Ryu here with another video for Blender. In this one we're gonna be talking about most important modifiers for hard surface modeling. I'm gonna show you which ones I'm using, what settings I'm applying and why. It's really easy and not that complicated, and surprisingly I'm using only 6 or 7 in my workflow, maybe 98% of the time, and occasionally I'm using others, but you know, it's not that common. So technically you could get away with using about 7 of them and that's it. So it's really not complicated, okay? Now a few things. I'm gonna be using Blender 2.91 and 3.0 for the reason that in the 2.91 I have no add-ons, and in 3.0 I got all add-ons, and I want to show you some differences as well. Might be interesting to see. Now we are receiving a lot of questions about all kinds of basic stuff in Blender, and today we received a question from Don, who said that, you know, he's going through our hard surface ebook and he didn't understand why he cannot see Boolean changes in edit mode with a Boolean modifier being live. So that's a very common question, and it's quite simple, so we're gonna address this as well. Now, if you would like to grab this hard surface ebook, all you need to do is hop on our website, which is blenderbros.com, and go to free guides. And on this page, we simply gathered all our free content for you guys, including all kinds of handbooks and tutorials, etc. So it's a really handy place to go to, and that's a book that Don is referring to, so it's a really cool book. Like I said, everything is free here, so hop on our website and get it. The link is in the video description. So now let's talk about modifiers first, okay? We're gonna go to Blender 2.91. I'm gonna enable screencast keys so you can see what I'm doing, and we're gonna have a wonderful heartbreaking vanilla experience. There are only a few modifiers that I'm using, guys, and you don't really need to overcomplicate stuff. It's really simple, okay? So first of all, where to find them. Now modifier is gonna pop up in here in this panel. Now you cannot see them because we don't have any mesh in the scene. So Shift A and add a cube, and you can see now additional icons appear. Now one of them, this wrench, is actually modifier icon. So when I click here, I can add any of these modifiers to my mesh. Now, the ones we're going to be talking about today, and these are the ones I'm using, like I said, 98% of the time, is going to be weighted normals, array, bevel, Boolean, mirror, solidification, subdivision, and I'm also going to mention lattice, because that one is pretty cool. But these are the main ones, and literally the rest of it, you know, don't worry about it. So the first one we're gonna add is a bevel, which is one of the main modifiers. But before we do that, we need to do a few changes to this mesh, because it looks like, you know, it looks a bit boring. So we're gonna go here and enable cavity, which will kind of put some highlights on edges, gonna make it look a bit more appealing. So that's peachy. And now we're gonna apply some, you know, modifier to it. So let's go here, select the mesh, and click on bevel. Now when you click on bevel, you'll see that a few things happen. First of all, we're gonna get this chamfer going around, and also we're gonna get this kind of like a faceting effect, right? So it's, you know, a bit of a harsh transition, and we wanna make it smooth. So to make it smooth, first of all, we're gonna add some segments. Now you could work with either one segment, which is called mid-poly beveling, and it's usually used for game assets. Because it saves a lot of geo, but we're gonna be using 3 segments, which is kind of like a standard I'm using for most of my models and courses, because, you know, they just go through on the portfolio, and, you know, you don't have to worry too much about it. Or when you create high poly, actually 3 segments is also good. So when you're gonna be baking high poly onto low poly, this is also a good you know, good amount of bevels to go with. So now we're gonna make it a bit smaller. So click here, hold left mouse button, hold shift, and then you can move your mouse left and right to make it bigger or smaller. Gonna make it smaller, and there you go. Another thing we need to change is that, you know, this kind of a harshness of transition between these faces. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna right click here and shade smooth, right? And then we're gonna go here and enable auto smooth, and that's that. But you can still see that there is a bit of a shading problem here, especially visible when I'm going to add some Boolean to it. So let's just add another cube and scale it and move it out here and move it up. And we're gonna go here to preferences before we do anything, and we're gonna add an add-on called Bool Tool, and that's a native Blender add-on. So just simply click that box and save preferences, and you're done. Okay, then you can select this cube, right, and before you do anything, right click and shade smooth, and then auto smooth. You gotta do it to every single cutter in Vanilla Blender, which is one of the suicidal things in Vanilla Blender. Shift click that mesh and Control minus on a numpad, and that's a shortcut that this Bool Tool add-ons enables you to perform. And this will perform a Boolean. Now you can see that this Boolean is creating some serious havoc on this mesh. And if I'm going to move that a little bit, you can probably see that here they're kind of like there are shading pulls quite severe on this mesh. It's going to be especially visible if I'm going to move that Boolean, okay, above the bevel, which is actually the correct position of this Boolean. Every single modifier in modifier stack has a sort of a specific place, okay? There's an order to it. And if I'm going to place this Boolean above the bevel, look what happens to the edges here. They're going to get beveled, you see, because now the cube is first cut and then is being beveled, which is exactly what we want. But now you can see that these pulls here are very apparent and the shading is really garbage. So what we need to do is add another modifier called weighted normals. This modifier, okay, you need to know two things about it. Actually, three things. Never use it with harder normals, and harder normals is actually something that comes with bevel. So if you go to shading, there's hard normals. You use either this or weighted normals, never use them together. So you use either this or hard normals, that's one. Two, you use it always at the bottom of the stack, okay? So this modifier should always be at the bottom. This should be the last modifier in the stack. And three, never apply it, okay? Never apply it to your mesh, all right? You can export it with an OBJ or FBX, but never apply this in Blender because you're gonna end up, it's gonna be a disaster. So do not apply this modifier, right? And keep it in the bottom. That's all you need to know. Now, Boolean, like I said, above bevel, but you can see that there is a bit of a problem here in a corner. This transition here is not really that smooth. It's really smooth here on the side, but here in the corner is quite harsh. To fix that, we need to go to bevel and change one more setting. We need to go to geometry, and under the miter outer, you need to switch to arc. And this will fix this issue here, okay? And these are all the steps you need to perform to, create a Boolean cut in Vanilla Blender. Now let me show you why people who use hardups have more time for vacations. We're gonna add a cube, we're gonna enable box cutter, I'm gonna cut it, add a bevel, right? And weighted normals, and I'm done. And you are still stuck in Stone Age. So be smart, go to Gumroad on Blender Market and get hardups and box cutter bundle. The link is in the video description. Because this is the only way to go. And by the way, all the modifiers with hardups are sorted automatically, so I don't have to do it. So really easy, right? You don't have to add any smoothing, and the auto smoothing is all done automatically. So all right, let's collapse this and let's go back to our vanilla experience. So here we talked about Bool Tool, bevels, and weighted normals. Now let's go back to questions from Don, who was asking why he cannot see Boolean in edit mode. Now, if you have this Boolean, right, modifier being live, meaning it's not applied to the mesh, so you didn't apply it to the mesh, it's basically an illusion. So you can move this Boolean modifier and, move it, or you could just go to edit mode, press 2, select the edge, and you can, for example, bevel it with Ctrl B, etc. So you can do a lot of things here with this Boolean. So the reason why you cannot see this Boolean in edit mode is because by default, it's actually switched off in edit mode. And the reason for that is basically because, this is an illusion, it's a live modifier, so you can move this Boolean here, right? But when you go to edit mode, the cube is untouched, so this modifier hasn't been applied yet. So when you click on the stack and apply the modifier, then when you go to edit mode, you can actually see that This is now a physical geo, okay? Physical geo inside here. But before, let's just Control Z. But before that, this is just an illusion. You can enable visibility of this cut here by simply clicking visibility in edit mode, and you can see that in edit mode if you enable that. So if you really need to see that, you can do that, all right? But by default it's turned off. Also, you can turn it off in object mode if you're going to toggle this switch here, okay? And this one, by the way, is visibility in render. So if you render this with this turned off, it will not show in render. So you're gonna be rendering just a cube. Hope that makes sense, all right? So that's basically the most important thing about booleans, about bevels, and about weighted normals. So there are different types of booleans. Of course, you can, for example, switch this here to intersect or union. Union is going to add that cube to that cube. So if I switch to union, you're going to get this. Or you can switch back to difference, or you can go to intersect. Now, the problem is that there are no other combinations here in Vanilla Blender, whereas in Hardops, for example, you can do something like this. So you can cut it and press X 3 times for inset boolean, and press T for solidification, and create something like this with ease. This basically takes about 77 years in Blender Vanilla to create, and you need to sacrifice about 3 cats and 2 pigs. It's a little bit cumbersome, and you also need to do it in a dark basement during the full moon, otherwise the results may not be desirable. So, quite a few conditions need to be met. Now, if you want to organize your booleans, you can always press M with a cutter selected and create a collection called cutters. And because Blender doesn't organize them automatically, press Shift 2, you can turn them on and off. Now with box cutter, this is done automatically. When I create a boolean cut, it goes automatically here to the cutter collection, which is created by box cutter, and you can see that it disappears from the scene, right? Just the cutter just is disappearing. If you want to keep the cutter in a scene, all you need to do is hold Shift, and you can then adjust your cutter, okay? You can recall any cutters by clicking on ever scroll and scroll your mouse. So it's really convenient, guys. Anyway, let's go back here and let's talk about other modifiers. So other modifiers, right? Let's talk about array. So let's remove this boolean and let's go to array. So we're gonna go to array. Blender by default will array in a way that you have no gap between objects. If I remove the bevel, you'll see, and the way the normals, you'll see it's gonna be like, one line, okay? So the reason why you can see this division here is because of the bevel. If you want to increase the distance, simply, move this slider here. You can also increase the count, so number of the objects, okay? Now, another thing that we can do is change the direction. So you could reset it here to, for example, 0 and start arraying on y-axis or on, negative y. And you could then, for example, offset this on z-axis if you wanted to, like that, or reset the y-axis and just simply array on that axis. If you need double array, simply go here and add another array, and and then you just can adjust this one. In Hardops, it's a little bit easier because all you need to do is, you just go here and simply go to modifiers and array. And you can array this. You can see that on this axis. Then you can press A and A one more time. And let me just remind you that I'm arraying this object with all these booleans being active, meaning I can adjust booleans on this mother object, and every single one's going to be automatically updated. What Hardops is doing is actually parenting all the cutters to every single object being arrayed automatically. So now what I can do is go to ever scroll and adjust every single cutter I want to on my mesh. You cannot do this with Blender Vanilla. I mean, you can, but again, sheep, cats, dark basement, and so on. It's a lot of steps involved. So that's an array. Now there's one more interesting modifier that's called Solidification, and this one is usually used with stuff like planes or just simply flat geo that you need to add some thickness to. So we're gonna go here and add solidification, And now you can see that there's a thickness to it. We can move it left or right to go down or up. There are two more interesting settings here with solidification, but we're going to be talking about. You can turn off this on rim, and what it will do, it will simply remove the underlying geo from the side that's actually flipped, meaning there are two sides of every geo, okay, positive and negative. I'm gonna go here to face orientation. You can see the blue one is correct, which means facing outside, and the red one is inside, okay? The normals are facing inside. So this is an inside of the mesh. If I'm gonna create a cube, for example, you'll see that the cube, if I go to edit mode and remove this face, all the faces inside gonna be red because the geo is facing inside. Now I can flip that by going to edit mode, right? Selecting everything in face mode and flipping it outside. So I can flip this and the rim will flip as well. So it's gonna flip to the top, okay? Because you're flipping the face orientation. Hope it makes sense. It's kind of a bit of an advanced thing, but you know, it's worth mentioning because it's quite important. The rim is really cool because what you can do is, you know, create this kind of a shape. Let's just make this a little bit less crazy and let's apply this. And we're gonna create another solidification on top of it, which will thicken this this mesh here. So we're gonna have this rim having a thickness. So you simply stack in solidification on this mesh to create kind of like a lid. This is very useful for subdivision workflow, okay? So it's very interesting. Another really cool feature of solidification is even thickness. Let me just grab a cube here and not plain cube, okay? And I'm going to scale this, and I'm going to go to edit mode 3 for face, shift select these two, remove faces, and I'm gonna add solidification to this mesh, okay? So I'm gonna add solidification, and you're gonna notice two things, okay? You're gonna notice that this face here is thicker than this face here, right? When I'm gonna apply scale, okay, you see that it's better, but it's not perfect yet. Now, if I'm gonna click this even thickness, every single wall is gonna get even up, so they all have the same thickness, okay? And it's really useful, especially when you are creating especially useful when you're creating shapes like this, you know. So go to edge mode and EZ and GY and EY and EZ and EX, sorry, EY and, you know, GZ, let's say, okay? And then what we're gonna do is we're going to solidify that, right? And you will see that very clearly the thickness here is different than here, but when I tick this on, everything is peachy. So you can create this kind of a shape, you know, and then you can select all these edges here, right? Control B them and, you know, have this kind of a situation. Right click, shade smooth, and, you know, auto smooth, and you got this kind of a really nice kind of a futuristic shape. Solidification, really fun. Remember these two settings, so on the rim and even thickness, and you're gonna be good. Now, solidification is really cool to use with subdivision. Let me just grab a plane, and we're going to go to edge mode and EY and Shift R, and then select these with Control, and then EX, move them here, S, Y, and GZ up maybe, and EZ, and there you go, right? Maybe scale them a bit more on the Y-axis, okay? And what we're gonna do now is we're going to, so now with this one, we're going to add some subdivision modifier, okay? And you see that we need to smooth it out. And with subdivision modifier, this is the exception. You do not need auto smooth, and you do not need weighted normal. So you do not need either of these, okay? Now you see that we lost the sharpness on the edges, especially visible when I'm gonna increase the number of subdivisions. But we can fix it by simply adding edges here with Control R. So Control R here, Control R here, Control R here, and Control R here. All right. That's cool. And now we're gonna add solidification, right? So let's add solidification. Now, if you add solidification to your subdivision, you'll see there's gonna be kind of like a weird shading. What you need to do is you need to move solidification above subdivision to make this work properly. And you can do all kinds of funky stuff with it, you know, and manipulate with these edges, you know, have a lot of fun. Basically, subdivision is kind of cool. So if you need to create some really smooth, perfectly shaded mesh with this kind of curving and bending, that's one of the ways of doing it, okay? So remember to keep the solidification above the mesh. Do not use auto smooth and do not use weighted normals with subdivision modifier, okay? So that's subdivision. Now, there's one more modifier I want to mention, and I'm not going to be doing this in vanilla Blender because my therapist told me not to do it. I'm going to do this in hard ups because it's just so much easier. I'm going to show Lattice, and Lattice is really cool. Let's just scale this up, Control A and apply scale. By the way, applying scale is really important for solidification, bevel, and array, okay? Let me explain what it is if you don't know. If I'm going to go here and drop a default cube, press N on my keyboard and go to item. On the scale, you can see that my scale is 1, 1, 1, meaning the scale is uniform and it's at the value of 1. That's the default value. If I'm going to start scaling this cube in any direction, you'll see that my scale is going to start being affected. And when I'm going to, for example, start, you know, beveling this cube, you can see that my bevel is not really at 45 degrees. It's just kind of skewed. But when I'm going to apply scale to my cube and reset these values and start beveling this edge, you see everything is now peachy. So you could use it to your advantage sometimes when you want to create shapes like this. But basically when you want to erase something, solidify something, or bevel something, always apply scale. So always remember to apply scale after you rescale something in object mode, because when you rescale something in edit mode, it doesn't matter, the scale always gonna stay the same, okay? So anyway, let's add some loops here with Control R, okay? And on top of that, we need to add a bevel. And I'm gonna press Z for wireframe, scroll to 2 segments, press P, and flex my points here. There we go. Press Control 3 for subdivision. And now I'm gonna add lattice to it, okay? So I'm gonna go to modifiers and I'm gonna add lattice. With hard ups, it's a hard ups lattice. I'm gonna press Q and I'm gonna add some segments with my, just simply moving my mouse to add segments on the Z axis. I'm gonna go to side view and I'm gonna select it with B, okay, and move it somewhere here. And I'm going to, and then go to select lattice. Now I'm going to do the same thing on X axis, and I'm going to select these, and I'm going to scale it on X. And if you want to create some, you know, very easy, really smooth, hard surface shape with without sculpting, lattice is your friend. Okay, lattice is a very powerful modifier. I use it sometimes, not very often, but sometimes. All right, so this will be lattice. Now let's talk about mirror, because we forgot about mirror. Mirror is really important. So mirror is very simple, guys, although in vanilla Blender it's a bit of a pain. When I'm going to add a cube in here, and let's say I'm going to cut this, okay? So let's just Shift D that, GZ to move it up, and scale it and move it in here. Shift click and, you know, cut it, right? And then let's say I wanted to copy this modifier, mirror this modifier across the mesh. Well, I select the modifier, I'm going to add mirror, and the mesh is going to disappear. And that's also, I've been asked quite often, you know, what the hell? Well, simply click on bisect and then click on this and select the mesh, and you can just copy across the mesh. Why it disappears, I have no clue, man. I just, you know, vanilla Blender, no. Just no, because in hard ups, you know, it's just so easy. I don't really have to think about it, because all I do is, you know, Boolean this, Alt, and then I'm select this, Alt X, and I'm done. So why bother? And then when I'm gonna add a bevel on top of it, right, and weighted normals, everything gets sorted automatically. I don't have to worry about anything. So, you know, who cares? You know what happens here? This is just crazy. But that's how it works. Now let's say I have this mesh, which is basically a mesh that has applied Boolean, and I wanted to mirror this across itself. And then you simply grab a mirror and, you know, bisect, and you're done, right? Now flip is an interesting option. You see, basically mirroring from right to left, okay? So when I flip it, it flips the mirror back to the basic. So it basically mirrors it first, okay, and then it flips it, which means it flips from this non-cut side to the cut side, which is why the cut disappears. But when you rotate it on Z by 180 and you apply rotation, then the cut reappears, because now I'm mirroring, okay, from left to right. So I need to mirror it first, and then I need to flip it for this to actually take an effect. Otherwise it will not work, you see. It's just bloody confusing. Whereas in hard ops, I don't care where the cut is on, because I can intuitively Alt-X and choose which direction I want to mirror it to. And if I want to flip my mesh, I can do it as well by simply, let's just apply this to the mesh, so it's applied, right? And if I want to flip that, Shift D X, right? All I'm going to do is Alt-X press D, choose flip mirror and flip, and I got flipped shape. And now this has not been mirrored, this has been flipped, okay? So this cut has been flipped from left to right. So really easy to, very intuitive, okay? And also the hard ops mirror has shit ton of other options, which are bloody amazing, which, you know, vanilla Blender just don't even ask how to do it, because, like I said, therapist says no. And these are the basics of mirror, guys. So really simple, nothing fancy, okay? So one more time, the modifiers you will really need is bevel, mirror, solidify, Boolean, array, subdivision, weighted normals, and, you know, occasional lattice, right? So what is it, like 7 of them or something, right? And that's it, you know. you don't even have to bother with lattice, to be honest, because most of the stuff is doable without it. So, you know, these 6 or 7 is, you know, is enough. And this will get you 98% of work done, no problem. And like I said, I really recommend you hard ops and Boxcutter workflow, because it's so much more intuitive. We have tons of tutorials on these, including free tutorials. And if you would like to grab these add-ons, there's a link in the video description, so go ahead and grab it. And if you would like to learn more about hard surface and, you know, go deeper and learn more about the hard ops and Boxcutter as well, I would highly recommend you hop on Blender Bros coaching community program. It's fantastic. We have, you know, tons of people, a brilliant forum where people ask questions. So we are very active over there. As a growing community, there are tons of perks, and you have access to, I think, 12 courses right now immediately, and also decal packs and trim asset. So you're probably going to be covered for several months of studies, and every month we release new content. We have a really cool content coming up on February. It's going to be this mobile generator modeling in Blender, including renders, etc. On March, we're going to go much deeper with this model. We're going to actually optimize the mesh, prepare it for game engines, and we're going to bake high polymaps, bring it to Substance Painter, texture it. Then we're going to create a realistic render in a real environment using Blender and Photoshop. And we're going to show you how to create a really cool, realistic looking composite for a portfolio, so you can attract more clients. So really interesting stuff. So I highly recommend you guys check out this Blender Bros coaching and community offer. Is really brilliant. So anyway, that's it, guys. Thanks so much for watching. If you have any questions and something is unclear, just leave the comments in the comment section under the video. I always read the comments and try to reply as much as possible. And if there's going to be a need for it, I'm going to create more videos on the subject. I hope it helps you out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.